Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Yvonne from Ginger Chick Rehab. I'm so glad to have you back and seeing what I am up to today. Now today's video, I kind of have met through, not physically met, but chatted a couple times with Melissa Marro of Vintage Bee Design. And she has her own YouTube channel and she has a cute little store in Florida. And it's just so nice when you see somebody using your technique and they give you credit for them using your technique. And that's why I always like, if I use some of these and if I know who they are, I like to give them a shout out. I think this YouTube thing is just nice to support each other. So in today's video, through chatting, and she was so gracious to give a discount of buying from her shop, that I'm like, you know what? She finally got the stencil brushes in that I've been wanting. So of course I was definitely going to order those from her. And then I wanted to see what else she had. And then I ran across, I know who Jamie Ray Vintage is. I know her stuff, but I guess I haven't really spent time looking at her site. So I ran across some crockery stencils on Melissa's site. So I was like, oh, I like Crocs. Oh, I always kind of have a hoard of Crocs that I want to redo. So in today's video, I am sharing with you the Jamie Ray Vintage Crockery stencils, which you probably all know already because I'm always seem to be late to the game, but this is my take and what I would do with them and what I put them on. So when you were thrifting or you're at garage sales or estate sales, do you bypass these kind of Crocs thinking, oh, they already have stuff on it, not much I can do with it? But I cannot pass them up. When they are crockery, I am not intimidated by any kind of paint job, any details on them. And of course, I love to find crockery like this that's just plain. So I'm super excited to share with you the process of what I do to these thrift store found crockeries to give them an updated and new look. So first of all, you know that we're going to be cleaning these items anyway and removing their tags, but we also need to see, can we remove the paint that's on the outside of these? So simply some Dawn dish soap and some extremely hot water that your hands can take it. And I usually like to let them sit between 15 and 20 minutes in the hot water to help soften up that paint. So hopefully it'll be able to be scraped off. For these little crockery, just like how I paint Crocs and then I seal them in, the same thing goes for what has been painted on these. So usually it's something painted on the outside of the crockery that's already been sealed in and then somebody else sealed it in. So you can keep it on there if you want to keep it on there, but then you can also take it off. Now this piece was a little bit on the hopeful side because I knew it was more of a manufactured piece that I'm like, yeah, nope, it is on there. It was sealed into the crockery itself and then glazed, so it is on there to stay, but that's okay. So at least I got 3 of the 4 cleaned off. So now 2 of these pieces I'm going to need to paint over their design. The one that has the blue speckles and of course this one where I couldn't scrape off the red heart. So I made sure that I don't want to touch the inside, so I taped it off with 2-inch masking tape. I like to keep that in case anybody wants food safe. I like to pick out colors that are coordinating what color I'm going to be painting these items with. And so to give it a good base coat and give something for my paint to stick to, I'm sealing these in with an undercoat of Rust-Oleum paint and primer in the flat black. So to paint these pieces, I'm going to be using a textured paint. So I'm going to be using Waverly's chalk paint in the middle and a baking soda mixture. And it's a 50-50 ratio. So just pour in a little bit of your paint, and then whatever paint you pour in that much of the baking soda. And then mix until the baking soda is totally mixed in. And the nice thing about painting something with that flat black is you know when it's dry and it's ready to be painted. So I have sealed these in with a polyacrylic clear coat to make sure that that black paint stays good and on there. And now I'm just going in with this baking soda and Waverly chalk paint mixture and just painting it on. Now I'm trying to go in the same direction, personal preference of what kind of a design that you want. I kind of like to make mine look like pottery, so I like to just work around the piece and paint around it. And I do have it on a Lazy Susan. It definitely helps be able to turn my piece as I'm painting it. I'm going in with a smaller brush when I get down to that bottom of it. There's a little bit of a lip that kind of gives you a guide of where you can stop painting. I'm just going to leave that bottom of it black, but I want to make sure it looks like it has a finish edge. So this fan brush just comes in very handy when it comes to little detail pieces like this. And the same for this, I'm just doing that same thing, just brushing that on, letting my turntable rotate it for me as I work around it going in the same direction. That way I'm getting that texture that looks like pottery, but I'm also getting the brush strokes kind of like it has been spun. Now these will need 2 coats to completely cover, so when it comes to my second coat, I just add more paint to the texture paint. I don't need it to be overly textured. It already has plenty of texture on. So after a few hours, I go back and it is dry enough to put that second coat on. And I like my paint to be a little bit more on the smoother, so I end up applying it with just the fan brush. That just gives me a little bit more smoother finish than using the chalk paint brush. So I am so super excited when Melissa hooked me up through her shop, kind of gave me that nudge to try some of the Jamie Ray vintage line. So I was super excited. I'm like, oh, Crockery stencils. I love Crockery. I love to create anything like that. So I was super excited. The only thing I didn't like about it, and you know, everybody's different, is that the printing was really small, and you know, my eyes are old and tired. And so I really wanted to be able to see what the details were on there when I wanted to use them. I didn't want to have to look up what the image was. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to make myself some copy paper samples of what these stencils are. So that's what I'm doing here. I just have my apple barrel and my Jamie Ray vintage stencil brush that I also got from Melissa's shop also. And I'll link her down below. Please support her. And for a first-time buyer, she does have a discount code also linked with that. She has her own YouTube channel, so I will link that also. But I thought, you know what, I'm just going to make myself some of these little samples so I can actually see a little bit more of the details, because I know that some of the Crocs that I have today are much too small to fit this entire image on. I really think that this is one of the only ones that right off the bat that I can put a full one on, and I definitely love this. So that's nice because I'm like, oh, I've got this sample now. I can see, even though these are colored now, when they were clear, I couldn't see them very clear. It's the first time actually even seeing them. I can't say that I've seen too much of these used. So I am a visual person, so I needed to visually see it in black, see it what I was creating. So all I'm doing a round object. So I've got my lint rollers holding that so it does not roll on me. And then I'm just taking some masking tape and figuring out the best way to get this to be nice and as tight as it can be on my crock. We're stenciling right onto the crock. No tissue paper here today. So I'm doing that dry brush swirling technique that I learned from Melissa. So I'm definitely glad to have run across into, well, I'll have to say introduced to each other. So I love that we can learn from each other. So just a little bit minimal paint on that brush and then just doing a swirling technique. And I'm going to go in very gingerly because some of the pieces and parts I might need to hold down a little bit. This is not going to be, if you don't want paint on your finger, this may not be the craft for you today, but I don't mind. My hands are washable. After I feel like I've gotten everything covered, now I can remove that tape and I can hold my breath and say a prayer that that image is there. So now I know my next one, I am not going to be able to fit that full image top and bottom, but nothing says you can't take a stencil part and use the pieces of parts that you want. I absolutely love these leaves. I love that little saying. So I'm like, well, you know what? I'm just going to put them side to side. So all I'm going to do is take some masking tape and make sure that I cover up those areas that are so close to those leaves that I don't want to accidentally, when I'm stenciling away, or coloring it away, that I accidentally touch. So now I'm just going to gingerly kind of like, okay, this looks like I've gotten everything, and then tape it. And then as soon as I figure out that I've got it, so I'm going to go ahead and tape it down. And yep, here we go again. I'm just going to do that same technique, a little bit of paint on there, make sure that my brush is covered, has enough product on it to cover, and then yep, here I go. I'm just like, okay, hold it down and just do a little bit of a swirling technique and hope that it's grabbing on, because this crock, not like the first crock, has a little bit more shine to it, so I know it may resist taking the paint. But the apple barrel multi-use, I've never had any problems with the paint being transferred onto an object. Then since I haven't sealed in the image, I can go back and clean up anything that I may not have gotten taped off. And then I'm going to go ahead and use a blow dryer to make sure that this is good and dry, because I'm going to not overlap but have that stencil next to it doing the other part of the image. No, I can't say that I'm necessarily a heart person, but I just had to share on the bottom of this crockery how it has that heart on the bottom. My crocks are just going to keep getting smaller, but I hope with this video that I share with you today, just some of my inspirations, just some ideas of what to do when you're out thrifting or you see these type of crocks and you think, oh, well, there's nothing fancy about that, I'll just bypass that. But yeah, I am super excited to run across these stencils. They've probably been out forever, but I'm always seeming to be late to the game anyway. So, yeah, I like being able to take the pieces and parts of what I can fit onto these crocks. You don't always have to take that whole image. Just because it has a whole image does not mean you have to do the whole image. You can take it apart. Remember, I said if you were worried about getting paint on your hands, this may not be the craft for you. Or I guess you can put gloves on, but I am absolutely loving how these turned out. And I chose to use black just because that's what my heart loves, but I think you could have used whatever color you wanted. So now I really had to dissect the rest of those stencils, trying to really figure out what pieces and parts on these 3 tiny crocks I could use. And I don't know about you all that are watching, but I definitely think printing these or stenciling these out on copy paper really gave me a nice visual of what I could use. And as you're taping off, remember to double check what you have taped off. Like, ooh, I got a little bit of this clover leaf here. I think it's a clover leaf anyway. Good thing I pick up my masking tape in this size at the Dollar Tree store. So, yeah, I rather go in little by little and making sure all those areas. And I'm going to leave a little bit of the leaves with this one. Now, I should have been a little bit harder, not so gingerly on that one, that I didn't really get a good transfer. But you know what? We haven't sealed these in, and that crock is glazed. So a wet wipe it is. I'll wipe it off, dry it off with a blow dryer, put that stencil back down, and try again. Now my last little crock that's left, and I'm just going to go ahead and use this Just That Pottery Co. on it. I'm going to set those off to the side and let them dry, but now I need to take the stencils over to my sink in some hot water, some Dawn dish soap, and I need to wash these off. So all I do is just hot water, the Dawn dish soap, a little green scrubbing pad. I put it on top of a washcloth and then just rub that acrylic paint off of there, and that way they're nice and clean for the next time I'm going to use them. And while I'm over here, I'm going to go ahead and wash off my stencil brush too. Somebody had sent me from an Etsy store this little heart shape that's used to wash off your brushes. And it is very handy. It was very nice of them. It was just a thank you for purchasing gift. And I wish that I remembered who it was from. But unfortunately, I may order a little too much from Etsy sometimes that I don't remember right offhand. While the paint is drying on those Crocs and my stencils are drying, I'm going to go ahead and finish up the ones that I had put the texture paint on. So where I had taped off there, you see the outer rim is a little bit of a mess, but that's okay. I'm going to go in and fix it now. So a couple coats of paint it needs around this rim now. And then after that is dry, I'm just going to go in with my sanding sponge and just take any of the overly textured paint off. Just not pushing very hard, just taking anything that might feel really, really rough off. And then now these can get a little embellishment on them. And I was super excited when this one said marmalade, because you know marmalade is one of my favorite things and it sells really well in my booth. So I was super excited to have a different type of design to put on one of my thrift flipped crockery pieces. So I'm not going to worry about the tape pulling the paint off. That chalk paint should be good and on there for tape to be on there. So yep, I'm just going to go in and it's pretty straightforward. It fits the entire little crock that I'm doing. I just need to make sure that it's nice and secure and taped down. Actually feel pretty lucky here because this one is a nice tight fit because it's just the nice right size for this crock. And nope, this one is too short also to get a full stencil on it either. So yep, going in and deciding which one I want. And I, dairy girl farmhouse in my heart, so going with that pure cream. Now I could stop right here and just seal them in with a couple coats of clear coat, but of course I gotta take one more step further because I just love antiquing Crocs. So I love to add that white wax to the entire Crock itself, and then going back in with some on the edges of the Waverly antiquing wax. After I get the antiquing wax in, I just go up and just blend it in. Fun and exciting thing about DIYs and crafting is you just keep doing an object until you love it. If you love it and that is all that matters. And hopefully if you're a reseller and you're doing something that you love, that the love of it will show through and somebody else will love it just as much as you. So I'm doing that same exact thing on the top of this where I put the antiquing wax and I'm just blending it, just making it look a little bit on the age side. I want to make sure that my front image is still just as clear, so I'm just going over it with a little bit of a wet wipe, very gingerly, not going to town on it because none of this is sealed in, so if I go too hard, I might take my entire image off. But I just want to make sure that that image is a little bit on the age side, so I don't mind a little bit of it coming off, but I want to make sure you still see the image. I always like to share two ways of doing this. So this time I'm just going in with that antiquing wax around the outer edges first, and then I'll go in with the white wax. It's just a process. It's all blending. That wax is wet. You can always take more off by adding natural, or you can take the wet wipe. You just keep playing with it until you visually love it.
After I get it distressed the way that I want, I go ahead and I seal it in using some polyacrylic, just some type of a clear coat. I choose to do a matte finish. If you want to look more like Crockery, you can do gloss also, but I like to do a couple coats, making sure that this top coat soaks all the way through those 2 coats of chalk paint. Then I also like to make sure that the acrylic paint is good on the outside of these, so a couple coats of just the Rust-Oleum and the clear matte, just to make sure that that image is on there.
Okay, so what did you think? It wasn't a terribly long video. Most of those cracks I didn't need to do anything to but clean up. And I just want to share, and maybe a lot of you already do, you can take bits and pieces of things. You don't have to use that entire image. And I know you don't necessarily have to use it on a crock either. But that's just my vision for what I was doing to those, and then showing you a little bit of the texture paint and how I would antique it and distress it. So I hope that you enjoyed today's video, and I hope I have inspired you when you're out thrifting and you see those cracks and you're like, oh man, somebody painted on it. You know, bring it home. Try to get that paint off like I showed you, and then like the way it manufactured one. So I just painted over it. That texture paint hides a lot. And as always, if I have inspired you in any way, give me a quick comment and a like so YouTube knows that you like what I am doing and that they will recommend me more. And if you're new and checking out our channel for the first time and you liked what you saw, hit that subscription button along with the notification bell. And we'll see you next time, guys. Bye.